ASMR Who, and this is continuing my journey through the Big Finish main range of monthly adventures. We're on story number 5. This is the Fearmonger, a 7th Doctor story, starring Sylvester McCoy, of course, and Sophie Aldred as Ace, written by Jonathan Blum, directed by Gary Russell, I believe. Yeah, this, the Fearmonger, is by far and away my favourite of the main range so far. I really enjoyed this story. I can sometimes, I can give or take the 7th Doctor, not give or take a leave. I mean, I can take or leave the 7th Doctor. I didn't really care for him much as a kid, and then I got a bit older and I really enjoyed him, and he was one of my favourite Doctors, and he's less so now. He's not, I wouldn't really consider him my favourite anymore, particularly, but I do enjoy him, and I enjoy some of his stories. I enjoy him and Ace, and I thought that this story really suited Sylvester McCoy. It really suited that era of the show. It felt like a season 26 story, or a season 27 story, a hypothetical season 27 story. It felt very much of that era, you know, in terms of the characterization and some of the conversations in there. It really fit. It felt very true to the period of the show that these characters are from, and I think as a story it just holds up really well today. The basic premise is there is a sort of far-right political party that's it's called New Britannia, and it's sort of riling people up, and there's this entity, this monster called the Fearmaker, which basically makes people afraid, and it feeds off their fear, and it's about sort of political paranoia and the way people sometimes demonize other people in political discussions. You've got you know, your party leader, your right-wing party leader character. You've got a radio host who is in opposition to her, I believe, but he's also, I'm fairly sure he's in opposition, but the way he was written, the language he was using, it felt so realistic to me in terms of the political landscape of 2023, and the way people talk about politics, the way people in the media talk about politics, the way people use words like woke and feminazis, and people will distill people to silly names and descriptors that can be quite vague, and you know, it's not a far cry from having people use words like woke and SJWs, and you know, if you were to write that story today, those words and those terms, those dog whistles would absolutely be in there. So it felt really, that aspect of it I felt was really effective, and I just thought it was a really interesting kind of story. It was a different kind of story. It takes its time a bit more. It takes a place over a longer period of time, and everyone's got their own sort of allegiances and such. I think it's quite vague as to when exactly it's set, but I think it's, I really appreciated the way it talked about politics, which of course Doctor Who has always been political, and this is proof of that. this story was written and produced in 2000, 23 years ago. It's very, very overtly political. It's about politics. And there are the way it discusses politics, there's a great conversation that the Doctor and Ace have about politics and about bigotry in politics and people who are very openly bigoted. You've got this right-wing party leader who is bigoted, very clearly bigoted, and who talks about, keeping people out and sending people back to where they came from and stuff like that, which is language not dissimilar to what you hear nowadays in regards to topics like immigration. And there's a conversation the Doctor and Ace have where Ace sort of, what's the word? She sort of laments the fact that it feels like nothing has changed since her time in the 80s, and since, even before that, there are always bigoted people and there are always marginalised people, and she's lamenting that, and the Doctor sort of reassures her that, 30 years ago, it would have been far worse than this, and we do make progress. It's not as fast as we would like, it's not as much as we would like, but we do make progress. It really reminded me of that great scene in Rosa, the 13th Doctor story, with Yaz and Ryan, obviously in 1950s Alabama, talking about the fact that they are still victims of racism in, modern day in 2018. And they talk about the fact that it's still there, but there is progress being made and we are moving on. And so, yeah, I just really like what this story did. I am quite, if you couldn't tell from the way I'm talking about this story now, I don't talk politics on this channel at all. Really, it's, unless it's a political story. I'm here to talk about Doctor Who and give you ASMR, but I think I'm quite a politically minded person. I'm left-wing. I quite proudly consider myself to be woke. I try to be, an ally to marginalised people, to the LGBTQ plus community, to, any marginalised group, any underrepresented people. I really liked the way this story discussed politics, the way it was about politics. But also it was a really fun Doctor Who story as well. There's a great, the cliffhanger to part 3 was really intriguing, kind of a bit low-key. It's not a kind of cliffhanger where everyone's gonna die immediately and how they're gonna get out of it. But it changes the stakes of the story, and it's a kind of cliffhanger where you go, oh, I've got to see, I've got to listen to the next part, not to necessarily get the immediate resolution to the cliffhanger, but because it implies, it gives a really tantalising hint. The story is changing now in the way that, like, the cliffhanger to Curse of Fenric Part 3, where what's his name, the guy in the wheelchair, stands up and he's possessed by Fenric, and the story kind of goes in this whole other direction. It's kind of like that, and it was a really, really interesting cliffhanger, really great cliffhanger for audio as well, I think. And yeah, I really, really enjoyed this story. Great performances throughout. Some of the side cast were not incredible, but everyone was decent, and I think Sylvester McCoy and Sophie Aldred really slipped back into their roles very, very easily. They had a great dynamic, a great rapport, of course. I think the story really suited this TARDIS team, this pairing. I love the way it talked about politics. I think it's aged really well in that regard. And it was just really interestingly well written, with a great cliffhangers and some interesting twists and turns. And yeah, this is the first one where it's a real recommend from me if you've not listened to any of these stories, and you're thinking about maybe dipping your toe into some of them. All of them have been decent so far, but this is the first one where I really do think check it out, especially if you have even just a passing interest in politics and the political landscape in the UK. I think this will really hit home and really be effective. I just thought it was a fantastic story, and yeah, easily my favourite so far. I definitely recommend it. I can't express enough how much I really enjoyed this story, and I urge you to check it out if you haven't done. It's only £2.99, £3 on the Big Finish website. It's free on Spotify. Yeah, if you've not listened to this, definitely go check it out. And it's just great because it's really, the past couple of stories have been decent but nothing special, and this story really reinvigorated me, and it's really made me glad that I've decided to take the plunge on Big Finish and to go into the monthly range. And because you might get a story like this, you find a gem like this that is just a really great, interesting story, and I want to talk about it, and I want to share my love for it, because these stories don't really get talked about much anymore, but there's really great stuff in there. So yeah, check it out. I loved it. Listen to it if you haven't listened to it. I had a great time. It was, just really good. Those are my thoughts on the Fearmonger. A fantastic story, in my opinion. So thank you very much for watching. Thank you for listening. Thank you for liking and subscribing if you so have done. And if you haven't, please do. That'd be really great to grow the channel and get more people. Let's bring more people along for the journey in the main range. But that is all for this video. Thank you very much for sticking with me, and I will see you next week for the Marian Conspiracy.